what I'd like to start with, especially this is for Professor Robles-Meléndez, when we have a new book in our hands as educators or as parents or caregivers, and perhaps it's not one from a trusted source like Lee and Low, just very briefly, before going into all the auditing tools and things like that, is there anything we should be looking for as we flip through this book to decide whether or not this is something that would be a valuable book and one worth bringing into our children?
Well, the first thing is that we need to read the story. If we don't have a context as to what the story is about, we should actually look to make sure that we understand whether what is presented is accurate, because accuracy in terms of details about a historical event or about a cultural group is very critical. What we see in the picture book is actually sending messages to a child. So we need to make sure that that is accurate. The second thing, we need to make sure that whichever story it is, that it is age appropriate, because they're wonderful stories that may be appropriate later on for a child that may be in a 4th or 5th grade, but not for a kindergartner or a preschooler. So it's important how concepts are presented to. And we need to look at the images. Sometimes the print may say something that is different from what the illustrations are portraying. So we need to make sure that we read the illustration, because they are part of the story. That's why they're called picture books, because a lot of the story is being actually shared through the illustrations.
Super. Yeah, thank you so much. Jill, I was wondering, I hope we could get some of your insider knowledge. And I'm wondering if there's anything upcoming that you're looking forward to, any trends that you're seeing in books, anything that we should be excited about?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the areas that fill us with hope, I know our editors just returned from the American Library Association conference in Chicago a few weeks ago. And what was so exciting, at least among publishers, to see is that a lot of progress is being made in Spanish in particular. That is definitely something in terms of other languages are still very underserved and underrepresented here in the United States. So it is a real challenge for educators and librarians to find other languages. But I am filled with some hope, particularly around Spanish, that is something that is changing, both frontlist as well as backlist titles that are being brought into Spanish. And so stories that are not just deemed as, oh, this is a Latino story, but also just like this book won the Cres Scott King Award. We're bringing it into Spanish too. So that is exciting to see that there is more accessibility around Spanish. I think also in terms of watching, we're seeing a lot of trends around wanting more, as we talked about, pushing in more diversity across genres. So in nonfiction, mystery, science fiction, and then also, at the board books, it's really challenging for families who are starting their home libraries to find books from 0 to 5 that are really diverse and also accurate. And so seeing progress being made there too.
Super, thank you. I guess along those lines of books about specific groups, we have a question here from Joy, and she's wondering if off the top of your heads, you have any books that you would recommend about children of different cultures getting along together?
There are actually several books, especially like Welcome to My Classroom, where you see children from different cultural backgrounds. And actually, if you just start with that one, even the one that was published a long time ago by Fox, she actually also talks about the commonality among diversity, which I think is the key message when you're trying to find how to bring together a group where you have a diverse ethnicities. But there are quite a number of those available right now.
Yeah, super. And I'm sure we're going to go through all those book lists. For Jill, I have a question here from Nancy, which I think is really applicable to so many people, especially teachers in schools. She's wondering if you have any suggestions on funding for a classroom library. And she notes that her school system, and I know my children's also, seems to have partnerships with traditional book companies, such as Scholastic. So do you have any suggestions for teachers and school administrators?
Yes, I know for a long time, Edutopia was tracking a lot of grants that could be used for classroom libraries. So they kind of kept an updated list of like what's monthly available for teachers to apply for specific grants from different foundations around the country. Definitely what we have seen in terms of a lot of teachers have had success with working with First Book for their classroom libraries. Donors Choose is ways to get, and you can specifically request and build across publishers. So knowing if there are specific titles that you want to have, name jar for every kid in your classroom, you can build campaigns around that. There are local places. I think in Indiana, there's a Teachers Treasures where they work with publishers to get as many diverse books specific to communities that and the school districts that they work with. But I would definitely also start with even your local PTA or PTO, because they either know of local donors that are, providing grants, or they can. For Leonlo, some of the majority of even our sales with schools actually usually come with either teachers or parents that they got a $1,500 grant to start a classroom library or to bolster a classroom library. And so that, that $1,500 means so much to that individual teacher and to those students, and can really grow from there.
Super. Thank you. That's so helpful. I have another question here from Sarah that I think it's a little bit more general, but I think especially these days is so interesting. It's something we don't think about so often. She writes that lots of students, even in the kindergarten level, are using ebooks, so Kindle and Nook. She's wondering if there are any tips that we could guide students to get used to reading paperback books. Is this something, I would add, that we should be doing, or should we be accepting reading on ebooks as well? And she's wondering, especially in relation to multilingual, multicultural students and parents. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think that we need to balance both. Because both are important, and this is a time where technology is part of our reality. So it is important to expose them to both, because they both have advantages. So making sure that you have titles that will be only in print, that you have in your library or literacy corner, and then those other ones that are ebooks. So that balance is also what creates the habit of knowing that you can find both resources. And before I forget, just came to my mind two titles of books that are welcome all diversity. One is Clever Sticks, and actually it's a book from 1995, but continues to be wonderful because it's a kindergarten where you see a variety of diverse ethnicities. And another one that I just came across recently is called Together We Grow. And it's also using animals pretty much along the same lines of the Big Umbrella. So two other ones that you may want to explore that probably will also bring that idea of unity.
I'd like to add to Wilma in terms of, format. If kids are reading on ebooks and they are comprehending, that is incredible. Many state district assessments are happening digitally. So it is important for kids to be able to feel comfortable reading and comprehending on digital devices. But if there are ways to either hold office hours or a field trip to a public library to get kids in there, to get families in there, every kid in September is walking out with a library card to really help show that this is a place for kids, all kids, to feel welcome. If you're finding that either it's easier for families to consume books on ebooks, or they can just go through more that way, also consider finding ways to encourage audiobooks. Those are wonderful ways for families to listen and engage. And then you can have kids at different reading levels within the family, and also parents participating in that book that they're enjoying. And then if there are many digital libraries out there right now, there are also many different platforms that show books. I would continue to encourage, as the educator, to kind of put your thumb on the scale on elevating who's doing a better job. For example, at Leonlo, we're really protective in terms of we want to see if our books are going to be presented digitally, that the emphasis is on the text and the books. It's not overly animated and turned into a cutesy cartoon, that we're still really making sure that the experience is that the kids are reading a book, even if it is presented digitally. And then, if there's also a way to think about what aspects that they're loving about the ebook. That might just be because on the digital device, they're able to consume the most fastest versus, having the books physically. but if there's in terms of they like, the illustration style, maybe graphic novels or comics is like a nice way to kind of bridge them into consuming and enjoying print as well.
But always remembering that the use of technology is also something that we need to mindfully use it accordingly to their age group. Developmentally, we know that there is a time when we're going to be actually using it and how to appropriately use it. We definitely want children to become technology users, but appropriately, and making sure that it is used in combination, especially the younger they are, together with an adult or together with peers, because that also brings the interaction, which is an important piece whenever we're using language and literacy materials.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of languages, Brianna brought up a question here. She's wondering, what would you recommend is the language we should use if students question why some of these books may be banned from their school library? Since we know that certainly has been a topic in the news recently. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's definitely coming up more both from students as well as for caregivers. So I think first and foremost, I would check with your local, both if you're a principal, you may already have information in place. The district might already have recommendations on how to engage with parents. If you're selecting a book that potentially, will broach difficult conversations, making sure that you are involving parents from the beginning. Don't shy away from that. I mean, these are your partners. We're with kids for 10 months of a school year. Our parents are going to be with our kids, through 13 years of their education and beyond. So really thinking about how can we bring them in from the beginning to get everybody on board, because usually that's just that level of transparency and that trust building is what matters the most. In addition, your public library, they are going to have great resources on any book that may be on a banned list or on how to talk about that book, how to teach that book, as well as, praise sheets or tools to get people excited about using that book or why we're going to do it. I would say in terms of in Wilma's discussion, and she really talked about going back to what is your purpose for using this book in the classroom? What lesson, what objective are you trying to achieve? And making that clear to both the students and to caregivers and your administrators, that this is why you think this is the best book to teach this topic. But yes, use your librarian, public librarian or school librarian. They are your ally.
Yeah, and work together as a team, either with this in the same grade level or together as a team that will decide and determine and have a good rationale for why we need this book. What is it going to do in terms of bringing up points or actually clarifying points? So as a team, you're stronger and you can actually make a very strong point in terms of why this is needed and why it is actually important for the students.
Oh, thank you both. And I see we only have 2 minutes left of the entire conference. So I wanted to thank you both so much for coming and leaving us with these inspiring words.